David, I want to go back to the list and get your observations with the top 100. What do you
Hmm.
notice just through all these players? Just your observations, just through, and it's kind of, I think, goes through the history of the NBA. So, what are your observations in terms of play style, in terms of evolution of this player mentality, scoring, just the evolution of the game? What did you just observe through just compiling this list overall?
Well, Chris Webber has this great saying that championship teams aren't necessarily the most talented. They tend to be the most stubborn. They just they will not accept losing. They don't accept defeat. They continue to fight in the face of defeat. And I think that that is applicable to all of the 100 players that are in this book. Is they all had obstacles of one kind or another. Some were talent based, some were injury based, some were race based, some were, all kinds of different things. They all kind of overcame all of those obstacles and became the greatest at their positions in their era. We made a conscious decision that we were not going to fall victim to recency bias, and we were not going to just have 95 of the top 100 players be guys who played after 1990. That would be absurd, right? Um, we wanted to make sure we honored every era of basketball. You don't have an NBA without George Mikan, right? It doesn't exist. He saved the league. You have to acknowledge that, right? You have to um, give him his flowers for his role in keeping the league alive in its infancy. Um, Russell and Chamberlain for similar reasons. There and we wanted to make sure like Bob Pettit is a great player. Like he should be in this book. Like you shouldn't forget Bob Pettit because he stopped playing 50 years ago. Like he was still a great player. So we wanted to honor all of the NBA's runway. And that was an important part of it. Um, because to your point, the skills, the stubbornness of those players is just as impressive as the stubbornness of Jason Tatum and today. Like same thing. Hadn't won yet. Can't win with him. Can't, doesn't make his teammates better. All this same stuff they said about Jordan. Same stuff they said about Will Chamberlain. Same stuff. You know what I mean? There's a flow line, a through line through this. And the greatest players just keep coming. They don't stop. They keep attacking. Um, and that's hard to do. It's hard to do because you get older. It's hard to do because you get injured. It's hard to do because you get paid a lot of money. And once you get paid a lot of money, that incentive can go away for a lot of people, and it doesn't go away for the greatest. Nobody cares how much money Kobe Bryant made in his career. You know what I mean? Nobody cares because he brought it every night. He was there on the court, and it never money never comes up. You know how money never comes up when you're talking about the greatest players of all time? No, never, ever comes up. Um, because they transcend that with their stubbornness and their greatness and their will and their work ethic and all of those things. And luck plays a part in this too, for sure, as it does for all of us. But I found that it's funny how lucky the greatest players of all time tend to be.
Point.
Can you go into that? Like, through just your research, how many players do you think have been truly lucky, just the breaks that have gone their way, or do you think that's just a part of sports?
I think it's just a part of sports. I think that when I say luck, I don't literally mean they found the four-leaf clover somewhere. I
Sure.
mean that they had good fortune. A coach believed in them. A player who was in front of them got traded or got injured. They were able to overcome or get return from injury because modern medicine's better than it was 40 years ago. They like when I started covering the league, if you tore your ACL, your career was pretty much over. Like you had it was a very small chance you were going to come back and be a good player again. Well, now ACL is, I'm not going to say it's no big deal, but people come back from it all the time. People come back from it, they play, they're just as good as they were before because training is better and operations are better. Surgical procedures are better. They don't cut as much. You don't have to wear a hip to ankle cast is what you had to wear back in the old days after an ACL surgery. and you had to wear it for 6 weeks, right? And that was standard procedure. Like every doctor would tell you that's what you should do. Well, nobody does that now, right? Like, so that's luck. So somebody who gets hurt now doesn't have to worry about an ACL injury ending their career. That's luck. That has nothing to do with them. That has to do with things are better now than they were 40 years ago, and it's easier to come back from injury.
Wanted to ask David your opinion. You wrote specifically the chapter on Wilt Chamberlain, and I
Yeah.
feel like he's a character in NBA history that, I mean, Justin and I did not have the privilege of watching, but you
Mm-hmm.
get narratives that are very, very polarized,
Sure.
like ball hog or all the way to like the greatest that ever did it. Just wanted your thoughts on Wilt Chamberlain and sort of like a modern understanding of his career. Maybe what are some misconceptions that you think people have about Wilt Chamberlain?
Well, I mean, I think people get caught up in the numbers, and I understand that. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers because his numbers are different from everybody else's numbers who ever played the game.
Yeah.
From player one to whatever players, 19 billion, whatever it is now. I don't know how many people played in the NBA, but um, his numbers are different. They just are different. They're bigger. They're out. They're just so much bigger and larger and just insanely huge. Um, you have to start with that, right? But you can't get caught up in that because just like you can say, well, he averaged 50 a game, he must be the greatest player of all time. You can also say, well, he only won 2 championships, so how great could he be, right?
Yeah.
There's some truth in both of those statements, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So you try to talk to people who saw him play to get some sense of his greatness, his inability to be guarded. We have Bob Pettit, who I mentioned before in the book, saying that when his team would play Philly, the pregame was literally, all right, Wilt's getting 50. Who do we need to stop? Because you're not stopping Wilt, right? So, and that was how every team began their discussions of Wilt, and because he just was so physically dominant and athletic. I think the athletic part maybe gets overlooked. They just think he was big. It wasn't that he was big. There were other 7-footers in the NBA when he played. He was big and a ridiculous athlete. He held track and field records in what was then the Big Eight, which is now the Big 12, for years after he went to Kansas, right? Like he held high jump records for years. And so he had incredible athletic ability that just made him impossible to guard. And so I try to respect that level because it's so unique and so rare. You want to give it its props. You can look, a lot of people, I wrote about it for the 75 and we updated it for the book, and a lot of people said, he's the greatest ever. Like, why are we even having this discussion? And there's a case. He's got a case, but yeah, I mean, Wilt can very easily fall into caricature, and we wanted to make sure we wrote about the guy, the actual person, right? And so that was important.
I want to focus on Michael Jordan and an interview that you did recently with Rich
Mm-hmm.
Eisen. And
Mm-hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, you said that Michael Jordan had the greatest will of anybody you ever seen.
Correct.
And I just want to ask, in this era of sports now, is it possible for an athlete to have a similar will to Jordan? What I mean by that is just the way the sports is in terms of NIL, the money that they make, just the
Mm.
savviness of your athlete that might happen earlier in high school, social media. Is that possible for an athlete just to have that same will to win, or is that just human nature that we'll see somebody with just that someday? It might be 50 years, 100 years from now, but it will happen just in terms of how the life cycle of sports works.
I mean, I'm sure that there's some child out there. Maybe he's 3 right now. or maybe 20 years from now, there'll be a child born that has a similar will. So yeah, it could happen. Sure. I mean, Kobe was close in terms of will. He was very close. He had similar kind of mindset to Michael, which is seek and destroy. And so he was very close. But at the end of the day, Michael's was greater to me. It's just me. It doesn't mean I'm right. But I think it helps if you saw them both. It helps if you actually saw them both play at their best. And I saw both of them play at their best. So I think I have some standing to make a judgment on which one was better. But like I said, excuse me, Kobe was close. He approached the game very similarly to Michael. He trained the same way. Had similar types of games. Not quite the same, but similar. So yeah, I'm sure that it's possible that in the next 20 years, we'll see somebody that kind of looks like Michael, kind of looks like Kobe a little bit. You know, the problem is when you anoint people after one good playoff series and say, well, they're just as good as Michael Jordan, like they did with poor Anthony Edwards after last year. And I keep going, whoa, wait a minute. Like, how did he get to Michael Jordan level? Because he had one good playoff series. What? You know what I mean? Like,
pump the brakes.
So, yeah, people want so badly to find their Michael Jordan so that they can say they saw the greatest player of all time. And you just have to go, guys, come on. Come on. Come on. He never played a seventh game in a finals. That's the bottom line. He never needed 7 games, and he won 6 championships. Everybody else had to play a 7th game to win a championship, and his team never did. So that's where I start with Michael Jordan.